Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of What's on My Desk. I got an exciting one for you today. I have watches that I would say wouldn't fit the bill of, let's say, hype watches, but in my mind, they're hyper than some of the hypest hyper watches out there. Say that fast 5 times. And what did I bring? I brought an extremely rare watch from Lange. I brought its brother from the same place, Glashütte original from the same village that Lange is made in. We all know that Breguet is responsible for pretty much everything under the sun that was invented in the watchmaking. And I'll show you why this minute repeater is extremely important in that lineup. I brought an AP, which I would prefer over a Royal Oak, which is rarer than most Royal Oaks, and something you probably have never seen. And seemingly a Patek that's not a big deal, but that represents so much for Patek Philippe. So stay tuned to find out. I'm going to pick this up with Lange. In my last episode, I showed the very first Lange 1. Well, this one is not too far off. This is the 112021 Lange 1A Gold Guilloche. Now, most collectors will know that the Lange 1 is the watch that brought Lange back to life in 1994, but very, very, very few people know about this particular version. To understand the watch, you first have to understand the brand's Phoenix story, right? It was founded in 1845, wiped off the map after World War II, and reborn in 1994. They launched with just 4 watches: the Lange 1, the Tourbillon pour le Mérite, the Saxonia, and the Arcade. Out of those 4, the Lange 1 quickly became the face of the modern brand. And it still is today. The Lange 1 is the quintessential Lange. To me, it's one of the most iconic watches out there. It fits the top list. But by 1998, Lange was ready to flex. Right? We talked about flex earlier. They opened up a new manufacturer building in Glashütte and release this. This is once again, this is the Lange 1A, reference 112021, released in 1998 and was limited in just 100 pieces. And this one is the most unusual Lange 1 ever made. Why? The A in Lange stands for aurum, the Latin word for gold, and the concept defines the entire watch. The dial, solid yellow gold, finished with a beautiful guilloche pattern radiating from the time display. Even the date discs were printed in matching gold tone on the watch, giving the entire watch the rich, almost monochromatic gold look, if you will. But the gold themes goes even deeper. Inside is the caliber L901.1, I believe, the same actually used in the original Lange 1 with twin barrels and a 72-hour power reserve. And because the version features the open sapphire caseback, unlike the original Lange 1, which had a closed caseback, you can actually see the finishing that Lange is famous for, including the engraved balance cock and a traditional 3/4 plate. But in this watch, Lange went even further. Even parts of the escapement, including the lever and the escape wheel, were made from solid gold, which is extremely unusual since these high friction parts are normally steel. It's very difficult to do that out of gold and make sure that they don't wear out quickly. And historically, this watch was important for another reason, believe it or not. It was the first limited edition Lange 1 ever produced. It was created to celebrate the opening of the new manufacturer in Glashütte as the brand was expanding after its rebirth. So now technically this is not part of Lange's handmade, or what directly translates to craftsmanship line, which was introduced later in 2011, but in many ways it follows kind of like the same philosophy, right? It represents Lange's most artistic watches. These pieces showcase traditional decorative techniques like hand engraving, tremblage finishing, elaborate dial work that go far and beyond normal production, right? And the Lange 1A really feels like an early preview of that idea, right? I'm going to go as far as to say this is what inspired the craftsmanship or the handmade collection later in 2011, right? And again, and as I said earlier, many collectors see this watch as the predecessor to the Craftsman editions that we have today. This is a watch that came from very early years of Lange's modern revival, but already showed the level of craftsmanship the brand would eventually become famous for. And they only made 100 of these, and today it probably stands in one of the most historically significant early Lange 1 references. I'm going to move on to something I feel is one of the most special unknown Audemars Piguets out there. You guys know I'm biased. Audemars Piguet is my favorite brand, and while most will think of a Royal Oak when it comes to Audemars Piguet, and some rare Royal Oaks perhaps, and they're all kind of rare right now, hard to get, but to me, this watch is much rarer, and I think it makes it a lot more special because of that. I'm here to talk about the Mercedes-Benz 500K Roadster Platinum watch. It's a reference 14710 PT. Look, everybody, as I said, everybody wants to talk about Royal Oaks, but in the early 90s, Audemars Piguet was quietly making pieces such as this. the watch you're looking at is not just a skeleton watch, right? At a glance, oh, it's a nice skeleton. Audemars is known for nice skeletons. No, the entire movement here is a canvas for a piece of automotive art. If you look closely at the bridges, you'll see a hand-engraved Mercedes-Benz 500K Roadster carved directly into the open work movement. Every detail is in there. Sweeping fenders, the wire wheels, the long hood, the radiator grille. The engraver literally turned the architecture of the movement into basically, I guess, a miniature sculpture, if you will. Now, the car choice here is also not random either. The Mercedes-Benz 500K, also biased. You guys know I'm a big racing fan. I love Formula One, and Mercedes is my team, which, by the way, is doing phenomenal at the start of the season. Go K-May, go George. But anyway, the 500K is one of the most prestigious automobiles, as I said, for pre-war era. It was built between 1934 and 1936. It was powered by a supercharged straight-8 engine. The K actually stands for compressor with a K. Back in the 1930s, this was basically the ultimate status symbol. If you had one of these cars, you were somebody, right? So what Audemars did in the early 90s, they basically took that icon and they immortalized it inside one of their skeleton watches. The case on this watch is platinum, which makes it very rare, by the way. You mostly see these in yellow gold, right? It's about 34 millimeters, which today sounds small, although smaller is becoming the thing right now. But in the 90s, this was perfectly normal for a high-end dress watch. It's thin, it's elegant, it slides perfectly under a shirt cuff. I wore this watch, I know. Inside is the caliber 2120. Don't take that lightly. It's one of the most important ultra-thin automatic movers ever made. The architecture actually traces back to the legendary Jaeger-LeCoultre 920. The same base movement used historically for AP, Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constantin, right? Also, because the artwork takes center stage on this watch, there's no AP logo on the dial itself. Instead, the Audemars Piguet signature is printed on the underside of the sapphire crystals. So when you look at it, the logo kind of floats above the movement, if you will, right? This watch wasn't a one-off experiment. Audemars Piguet actually did a small group of skeleton watches like this in the late 80s and 90s, built around vintage automobiles. AP never really pushed them publicly either, by the way. The full story behind these pieces is still, I would say, a bit of a mystery, right? But over the years, collectors and dealers have pieced together a few of the other versions that exist. We had one here early on. It sold fairly quickly. Ferrari racing cars engraved onto the movement with tributes to cars like the Ferrari 315S from Le Mans. There are also versions featuring the Rolls-Royce Phantom 2 and Mercedes-Benz pieces in yellow gold on the reference 14677. You'll even come across watches from the same era that collectors associate with Bugatti themes, right? Productions on these were never officially published, but most estimates suggest they were made in very, very small quantities, like a few dozen pieces, depending on the model and the metal, platinum being the rarest. Personally, I think I would say platinum is the holy grail of this entire lineup, due to the fact that you have the striking gold movement sitting against the platinum case. Just gorgeous. And this watch also represents a very different moment in Audemars Piguet's history. Today, the brand is dominated by the Royal Oak. In the late 80s and early 90s, AP was still deeply focused on traditional complications, ultra-thin movements, and incredible hand-finished skeleton work like this. You see a lot of the same skeleton work, decorated rotors and things of that nature in the back of some of the earlier Royal Oaks from the 90s, right? Pieces like this were often made for like special collectors, distributors, perhaps maybe in specific markets, which is why you almost never see them. So I have a question for you guys. If you had a choice between this, a rare hand-engraved AP skeleton with a legendary movement, or a modern Royal Oak, which are you taking? Please comment below. Now I'm going to talk about the other Lange, as a lot of people like to refer to it, but make no mistake, this is not an other Lange. They just happen to be from the same place as Lange, i.e. Glashütte in Germany, right? And this watch is a total flex of German engineering. You heard me say on record that I feel that German watchmaking surpasses that of Swiss, and people are like, oh, what do you mean? Lange is not better than Patek and this, that, and the other. Look, there are names and there's quality, but we're not going to get into that argument. You guys feel free to comment that below, right? This is the Glashütte original PanoMatic Lunar Anniversary Edition. They made 180 of these pieces. While most people think of Switzerland for watchmaking, Germany has the one town that is just as important, and that is Glashütte. The story starts in 1845, again with Lange, when Ferdinand Adolf Lange moved to a small mining town to build a watch industry from scratch. Now, after World War II, the local shops were merged into a state-run company called GUB or GUB, right? But when the wall fell and Germany reunited in the 90s, they were reborn as Glashütte Original, literally carrying the soul of Saxon watchmaking into the modern era. Today, these guys are their true manufacturer. They make almost everything in-house, including their own dials, which is pretty rare in this industry. Most manufacturers will go out and have dials made elsewhere or buy companies that make dials, if you will, right? In German hierarchy, collectors put a Lange Söhne at the top with Glashütte original right on their heels. And one of their signature watches is the PanoMatic Lunar, introduced in the early 2000s. It's designed around the golden ratio, much like Lange. If you look at a Glashütte and a Lange from afar, you see a lot of similarities because they came from the same DNA, right? But this specific watch is the 180th anniversary edition. It was created to celebrate 180 years of town's history, and it brings some massive first to the table, right? This is the first time that the brand used Aventurin dial, and it's actually Aventurin glass. It's a material filled with copper pieces to basically mimic the star-filled sky, right? It's also paired with a mother pearl moon and housed for the first time in this line in solid 950 platinum. But the real story is inside. This debuts the new caliber 92-14. It replaced a 20-year-old movement and doubled the specs, right? Literally. Power reserve jumped from 42 hours to a massive 100 hours, and it's now fitted with a silicone balance spring for anti-magnetic resistance. Something that Ulysse Nardin brought us with the Freak, if you remember my last episode. You flip this thing over, and it's a masterclass in Saxon finishing. Again, the usual 3/4 plate, Glashütte ribbing, and a hand-engraved balance bridge. Glashütte and this particular watch is the perfect bridge between 180 years of history and the next generation of German watchmaking. Now let's talk about the Patek. In the beginning of this video, I said this Patek is extremely important, and I'll tell you why. And it's not an Aquanaut, it's not a Nautilus, but yet I deem this watch to be one of the most important watches. And what I'm talking about is skeletonization taken to extreme, if you will. This is the reference 5180-1R, standing for the rose gold bracelet. Now, Patek's watchmakers, when they were making this watch, the watchmakers removed nearly every piece of metal they possibly could without compromising the movement structure. There's no traditional dial here. The movement itself becomes the dial. Even the hour markers aren't applied components. They're actually the 12 spokes of the movement holder ring, which is what structurally connects the movement to the case, right? But skeletonizing the movement is only half the story, because once the architecture is hollowed out, the watch is handed to a master engraver for what Patek Philippe calls their rare handcraft treatment, right? 130 hours, nearly 3 weeks worth of work. An artisan uses a tiny steel engraving tool called a burn to carve traditional arabesque patterns in every remaining bridge and plate. Every single line is cut by hand because each stroke of the engraver's tools, I guess you can say, is unique. No two movements are ever really identical under a loop. You can literally put the two of them together and start looping, and you'll see they look different, right? Or a little bit different, I should say. Look, this is a deliberate presentation of a craft that many consider, I guess, a dying art today, right? Now, while the rose gold version was introduced in 2017, the movement inside traces back to one of the most important moments in modern watchmaking history. It was released to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the caliber 240, a movement that first debuted in 1977 during the height of the quartz crisis, at a time where the entire industry was, basically abandoning mechanical watchmaking in favor of battery-powered quartz watches. Patek Philippe chose the opposite direction. Instead of simplifying, guess what? They engineered one of the thinnest automatic movers ever made. The secret was the recessed micro rotor that you see in the back, which is built directly into the movement rather than sitting on top of which is what you usually see with a rotor, right? This design keeps the entire watch incredibly slim. Even with the automatic winding, the case measures just 6.7 millimeters thick. And when you look closely, there are small details hidden throughout the movement, right? The mainspring barrel is skeletonized into the shape of a collar of a cross, Patek Philippe's emblem, if you will, right? And if you wind the watch, you can actually see the spring tightening inside the shape. Because the bridges are so heavily engraved, the Patek Philippe seal had to be actually relocated to the micro rotor itself. And the hands are made from black and white gold, so they don't visually disappear against the rose gold movement beneath them. Most high-end watches impress people with what they do. For me, the 5180 impresses people with how it's made. And it's pieces like this that represent something arguably more important. It represents preservation of traditional craftsmanship at, I would say, its highest level. I never say I saved the best for last, but I will say I saved the godfather of all watchmaking for last. I'm here to talk to you about this classic minute repeater in yellow gold. Now, Abraham Louis Breguet didn't just make watches. As far as I'm concerned, he invented the whole damn industry, right? He gave us the tourbillon, the overcoil, and the iconic hollowed flip hands, among many, many other things. But his most musical invention? The gong spring. Look, before Breguet, repeating watches actually used tiny little bells inside the case to tell the time. And in 1783, he replaced those bells with a coiled steel gong that wrapped around the movement. This single invention allowed to make minute repeaters slimmer, much clearer sounding, and it's still the system used in almost every single minute repeater today, all those years later. And it's that history that what this watch exactly represents. Now, this is a reference 3637BA. It looks like a masterpiece from the 1700s if you look at the watch, but it was actually born in the 90s, during what collectors now call neo-vintage era, when traditional mechanical complications started making a serious comeback after the quartz crisis, if you will. And it was also a time when Breguet was proving to the world where mechanical art could never be replaced by a battery. This entire watch is basically a tribute to the design language Breguet created over 2 centuries ago. You have the signature coin edge case band, the blued hand, the Roman numerals, and a hand gear shade dial cut on traditional Rose engines, right? What's interesting is that the dial actually combines multiple gear shape patterns, including clou de Paris in the center and the basket weave pattern on the small seconds. Inside, manually wound caliber 5627, built on the legendary Lemania 399 architecture with about 340 components, I think, and also has a pretty impressive power reserve of about 40 hours. Now, the complication, of course, itself is the star of the show. You slide the repeater and the 2 hammers strike coil gongs to chime the hours, quarters, and the minutes. Every repeater has to be tuned by hand. So watchmakers are essentially adjusting it like a musical instrument. You would see people adjust the piano. One detail most people missed on the subdial at 3 o'clock, it isn't a second time zone. It's actually a 24-hour day-night indicator, which helps the repeater distinguish whether it's noon or midnight when it chimes. Here's another thing that's interesting. Because the repeater slide opens a channel into the case, watches like this usually have essentially 0 water resistance. High complications like this were never meant for daily abuse. They're mechanical instruments. This thing measures about 37 millimeters, I would say. It's very understated, but historically, this thing lives in the lineage of one of the most important, I would say the most important watchmaker that ever lived. Abraham Louis Breguet didn't just design watches. He invented the foundations of modern watchmaking. And pieces like this, to me, they're a reminder that the 200 years later, we're still building on his ideas. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you as always. I ask you that you like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.